Joel Rubin, president of Washington Strategy Group. He is a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State. Give me your reaction to that, Joel, because we do know that there are soldiers there, and there were soldiers there, despite the fact that it may have been a small number. There was a certain amount of soldiers there. Have we won? Was there a win to be had? And how are potential future allies going to hear this?
Yeah, Yasmin, we had our foot on the throat of ISIS, and Donald Trump just took it off. The United States is less safe today as a result of this horrible decision. And there's a bigger picture problem as well. I served at the State Department in the Bush administration when we invaded Iraq. And it was a depressing period. And I actually never thought I could feel as low about America's role in the Middle East. But today I do. I don't know which ally of ours in the region is going to trust us. We are now putting ourselves in an incredibly precarious position regarding any kind of threat coming from the region. We have allies now who are going to look to others for support. The idea, as you just mentioned, regarding Iraqi Kurds now getting sucked into Syria, we don't want a regional war. That is not an American interest. We don't need to see further fighting.
Is that where you feel like this could be headed?
Absolutely. We were in a way that we were the stopper in the tub. And it's not as if Turkey and the Kurds were not threatening each other for years. This has been going on for decades. It's true. But we were a buffer, and we were preventing the region from collapsing in that area in a direction where now we're witnessing it. And that can suck in actors from a variety of directions, and it's not as if we're going to be able to physically go and stop it. So this is an incredibly dangerous time. There is no real good planning for this because this is just a bad idea. And we need to have national security that's actually rooted in good thinking. And right now, the president's playing with fire in the region that already has enough fires.
So, Joel, quickly, just jumping off of the point that you just made, if there were to be a regional war, who would be the major players in this regional war? Who would be the leaders in this regional war? What open space has the United States left in leaving northern Syria? And how would that affect people here?
Well, we've essentially handed over Syria to Russia with Iran. And Russia right now is enjoying this situation with the U.S. pulling out entirely, and Turkey closer to Russia now as well. So those countries are going to be the main protagonists. The U.S., we're not going to get in the middle of it. And we're going to watch our allies, as I'm sure Saudi Arabia is very nervous. I bet that's why the couple thousand troops were sent out there. Mohammed bin Salman called the White House and said, "Are you kidding? You're not backing up anybody in the region." And so the White House got nervous and is now sending reinforcements there. So this is a slippery slope to which there is no easy end. We saw in the war in Iraq that there is no simple solution. Once you get into conflict, you can't just turn it off.
Syria. Back with us now is Joel Rubin, president of Washington Strategy Group. Joel, talk us through this. I guess my first question here is, what does it mean when sanctions are ready to go but not yet active? Is this basically just a direct threat to Erdogan?
Yes, it's a PR move. Clearly, President Trump believes that he is losing the public fight, and he's also losing the fight on the ground. And so he's trying to make a statement that he is going to get tough. He's getting a lot of pressure from the Hill, both sides of the aisle, both chambers, arguing that they need to move on sanctions. He doesn't want to seem like he's falling behind, but this is a PR move at this stage.
What does that mean from your perspective, going from inactive to active? What would be the tipping point, it seems, from what you were hearing from Mnuchin?
Well, when you enact sanctions, what you want is for them to be targeted in a way that produces an effect that is the outcome that you seek. And to have exacting sanctions to somehow stop the Turkish military from committing humanitarian atrocities against the Kurds, that's hard to see. So if the president is talking about broad-based sanctions to cripple the Turkish economy, which by and large is also a bad outcome, we have to remember that is not a good thing to cripple a country's economy, it isn't clear that that would stop the military advance. Remember that Turkey military is the second largest military in NATO, and they essentially have American weaponry that they're using right now against the Kurds. Sanctions aren't going to stop that. but it may, of course, cause Erdogan to think twice. But the president, he's not using these sanctions. I wish he would have announced a humanitarian aid package as well for the Kurds, would have offered some real assistance to help these people, to have fulfilled the American pledge to the United Nations. We're back by $1 billion in our arrears. What are we doing to help ease the pain and suffering right now that this policy has caused? These all should have been thought out ahead of time. It's not as if this wasn't predictable. And so broad-based sanctions, if they're not clearly targeted to affect that outcome, it's not at all clear that they'll stop this killing right now. So
what do you think it would take for Erdogan to stop down on what's taking place in northern Syria?
What it would take in the near term is it would take a broad international consensus together to lean into him, and that includes getting Russia on board, which is very difficult, to stop the killing right now and freeze it in place. My fear is that we don't have the teeth. You see, the teeth weren't that the American troops would somehow fight against the Turkish incursion. It was that we were sitting there and causing a buffer dynamic. So now that we're out, it's very difficult. We could, of course, and this is a sort of a nuclear button, we could threaten the Turkish military to cut them off entirely. We could cut off resupply. We could terminate training missions with them, a NATO ally. That is the nuclear button that I'm certain is being discussed on the inside as an option, and we may very well have to communicate that directly to the Turks that that's being considered.
Do you think Mnuchin was downplaying the situation that's taking place in northern Syria right now, saying that it is a humanitarian situation?
I think that Mnuchin was sent out there because he's a fresh face. He has not been a face that has been seen on this issue. Sending out Mike Pompeo could have been disastrous, considering the way he's being perceived now by the State Department, career people, and in the Ukraine scandal. So I think that this is outside of Mnuchin's brief, and he really just tried to stick to the sanctions topic.
When you think about the lives that have been lost so far, just in the last couple of days since this happened, it's been 3 or 4 days since this started to take place, and we have lost so many lives so far, including children. On top of that, you are beginning to see a refugee crisis of people leaving northern Syria, seeking safety elsewhere, and not getting support from anybody. What needs to happen to rectify what is taking place in northern Syria?
What needs to happen right now is that we do need to provide humanitarian assistance. We do need to call the Turks out, and we need to look at these options towards Turkey to stop their incursion. But we also need to really lean in with Russia. We need to lean in potentially with Iran as well, and others who are engaged in conflict in the region, and find a diplomatic path out. The Secretary of State is not doing his job. He is not engaging diplomatically with all of the actors regionally. There were people at the State Department working on this. They've been completely undercut by the president's decision. We need to lean in diplomatically and understand that this is not something that the United States alone can resolve. And I don't see enough urgency there in our international diplomacy to try to bring calm to this situation.
We have about 30 seconds left, but are you optimistic at all that something like that could happen, especially with the announcement today and sending more troops to Saudi Arabia, when you're saying you need to lean into countries like Russia and Iran?
Yeah, I'm not very optimistic right now, but as we're seeing, this is a very fast-moving situation, and hopefully the administration will think twice again about going back to the table more aggressively. The mistakes have been made. We can't turn back the clock. We do need to criticize them, but the diplomacy does need to get energized. It's not right now.